The ceremonial hall fell silent when Ambassador Vethera announced the match, and every Corinthian noble turned to stare at Marcus Cole with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. The human delegate will be bonded to Princess Seylith of the Third House, Vethera continued, her silver eyes betraying nothing. As per the terms of Earth's admission into the Galactic Covenant. Marcus stood motionless in his borrowed formal attire, acutely aware that he was the only human in a chamber filled with 7-foot-tall beings whose skin shimmered like liquid mercury. He had expected resistance to Earth's application. He had expected humiliation. He had not expected this. The whispers began immediately. Seylith? The council gave him a defective bride. She could shatter planets with a thought. They're disposing of 2 problems at once. The human won't survive a month. A tall Corinthian male stepped forward, Lord Vathus, whose opposition to Earth's membership had been vocal and relentless. Ambassador Vethera, surely you cannot be serious. The princess is unstable. Her psionic emissions alone could kill a lesser being, and humans are notoriously fragile. The council's decision is final, Vethera replied coolly. Unless the human delegate wishes to withdraw Earth's application entirely. Every eye turned to Marcus. The trap was elegant in its cruelty. Refuse the match and doom humanity's bid for galactic recognition. Accept it, and likely die in the process. He thought of his sister back on Earth, of the colony worlds that needed covenant trade routes to survive, of the billions of people whose futures rested on this moment. He thought of his late wife, who had taught him that some things were worth more than survival. I accept, Marcus said quietly. The whispers intensified, but a new voice cut through them, low and resonant, like thunder rolling across distant mountains. So the council sends me another sacrifice. The crowd parted, and Marcus saw her for the first time. Princess Seylith stood at the entrance to the hall, her silver skin marked with jagged black lines that pulsed with barely contained energy. Where her other Corinthians were elegant and composed, she was chaos-constrained, beautiful in the way that lightning was beautiful, dangerous in every line of her form. Her eyes were entirely black, without iris or white, and they fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made his spine tingle. Your Highness, Vathus began, his voice losing its earlier confidence. You need not. Silence. The word was soft, but the stone pillars around her cracked. Several nobles stepped back. I will inspect my gift. She crossed the distance between them in long, predatory strides, and Marcus forced himself to hold his ground. Up close, he could feel the pressure of her presence, a weight against his thoughts, a static charge that raised the hair on his arms. You're afraid, she said, studying his face. But you don't run. Running wouldn't change anything. No. It wouldn't. She circled him slowly, and Marcus caught fragments of whispered conversations around them. Warnings about her episodes, rumors of the 3 previous betrothal candidates who had fled the planet, speculation about how quickly the human would break. They call me defective, Seylith said, stopping in front of him. Unstable, dangerous, they are not wrong. Your Highness, Seylith. Her black eyes narrowed. If you are to die because of me, you should at least use my name. Marcus met her gaze steadily. In that moment, he saw something beneath the crackling power and carefully cultivated menace, something that reminded him painfully of his own reflection in the months after Elena's death. Isolation. Exhaustion. Bone-deep weariness of being treated as a burden rather than a person. I'm not planning to die, Seylith, he said. And I don't think you're defective. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. Then the mask returned, cold and impenetrable. Then you are a fool, she said. But perhaps a more interesting one than the others. She turned and walked away, the crowd parting before her like water around a blade, leaving Marcus standing alone in the center of the hall with the weight of an empire's contempt pressing down on him. Ambassador Vethera approached, her expression unreadable. The bonding ceremony will occur in 3 days. I suggest you use the time to prepare yourself. Does anyone ever tell her she's not a monster? Marcus asked quietly. Vethera paused, something almost like surprise crossing her features. No one has survived long enough to try. Then I'll be the first. The quarters assigned to Marcus were comfortable but remote, a clear message about his status within the palace hierarchy. He spent the first day studying everything he could find about Corinthian culture, bonding ceremonies, and psionic abilities. The second day, he requested an audience with Seylith. The servant who received his request looked at him as though he had asked to swim in molten lava. The princess does not receive visitors. Tell her I'm bringing her a gift. 3 hours later, Marcus stood outside Seylith's chambers, clutching a small pot containing a flowering plant from Earth, a night-blooming jasmine that had survived the journey in stasis. The guard stationed at her door watched him with a mixture of curiosity and morbid fascination. "She agreed to see you," one of them said, incredulous. "She hasn't agreed to see anyone in 4 years." The door opened before Marcus could respond, and he stepped into a space that defied his expectations. Where he had anticipated darkness and decay, he found instead a vast chamber filled with light. Crystalline structures grew from the walls, refracting the illumination into countless rainbow patterns. Books, physical books, ancient and rare, lined shelves that curved around the room. And everywhere, there were plants, alien species he couldn't identify, growing in elaborate arrangements that spoke of careful cultivation over many years. Seylith stood by a window that overlooked a garden far below, her back to him. The black lines on her skin pulsed more slowly here, and her posture lacked the aggressive tension she had displayed in the ceremonial hall. "You brought me a weed," she said without turning. "It's called jasmine. On Earth we consider it beautiful. Humans have strange standards." She turned then, and Marcus saw that her expression was guarded, but not hostile. "Why are you here? The bonding ceremony is tomorrow. I thought we should talk." "Talk?" She said the word as though it were foreign. "About what?" "About whatever you want." Marcus set the jasmine pot on a nearby table. "Or we can just sit, in silence. I'm told I'm excellent at that." Something that might have been amusement flickered in her black eyes. The other candidates were not so casual. The other candidates were probably smarter than me. Undoubtedly. She moved closer, studying him with the same intensity as before. They also never made it past the threshold. "You are the first to enter my chambers in a long time. I'm honored. You should be terrified. I've been terrified before. It gets exhausting." Seylith stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus felt the weight of her attention like a physical pressure. Then, unexpectedly, she sat down on one of the cushioned platforms that served as Corinthian furniture, and gestured for him to do the same. "Tell me about this, Jasmine." They talked for hours. Marcus spoke of Earth, of its oceans and mountains and cities, of the way night-blooming flowers had evolved to attract nocturnal pollinators. Seylith listened with an intensity that belied her earlier dismissiveness, occasionally asking questions that revealed a keen scientific mind. In turn she spoke, haltingly at first, then with increasing fluency, about her abilities. She had been born with psionic potential that exceeded any recorded in Corinthian history. As a child, she had been celebrated. As an adolescent, when her powers began to destabilize, she had been studied. When it became clear that she could not fully control her abilities, she had been isolated. "They are not wrong to fear me," she said, her voice flat. "When I was 17, I leveled a city block during a nightmare. 234 people died. That wasn't your fault. It was my power, my lack of control. An earthquake isn't the fault of the ground." Marcus leaned forward. "You've spent years trying to master abilities that no one else in your species has ever possessed. That's not deficiency, that's impossible odds." The black lines on her skin flickered erratically. "You don't understand. I am a weapon that cannot be controlled. That is why the Council chose me for you. They expected I would destroy you and give them an excuse to reject Earth's application. And what do you expect?" She met his eyes, and for the first time he saw uncertainty there. "I don't know. No one has ever asked me that before." Marcus reached across the space between them and took her hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, and he felt a faint tingle of static where they touched. Seylith went perfectly still, staring at their joined hands as though she had never seen such a thing. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Marcus said, "I want you to know that I chose this. Not because I had to. Because I looked at you in that hall and I saw someone who deserved better than what the Council offered. You see weakness. I see strength." He squeezed her hand gently. The kind that doesn't break even when everyone expects it to. The pressure in the room shifted, and for a terrifying moment, Marcus felt the full weight of her power. Vast and terrible, like standing at the edge of a black hole. Then it receded, and Seylith's grip on his hand tightened. "You are either the bravest being I have ever met," she said quietly, "or the most foolish. My late wife always said I was both. She sounds wise." She was. Marcus smiled sadly. "She also taught me that fear is a poor reason not to love someone." Seylith's black eyes widened, and the lines on her skin went completely still for the first time since he had met her. She said nothing, but she did not release his hand. They sat together in silence as the artificial sun set outside her window. Two broken people holding on to each other against the weight of everyone else's expectations. The bonding ceremony was held at dawn in the palace's ancient heart, a chamber carved from living crystal that amplified psionic energy. Every noble family in the Korinthian Empire had sent representatives. Every one of them expected to witness a disaster. Marcus stood at the ceremonial altar, wearing the traditional white garments of a Corinthian consort. Beside him, Seylith was resplendent in black and silver, the colors of her house, but her posture was rigid with tension. The black lines on her skin pulsed rapidly, erratically, a warning sign that every Corinthian in the room recognized. "She's losing control," someone whispered. "The human will be dead before the vows are complete." Lord Vathis stepped forward, his expression triumphant beneath a mask of concern. "Perhaps we should delay the ceremony. For the human's safety, of course." "The ceremony will proceed," Ambassador Vethera declared, but even she looked uneasy. The High Priestess began the ritual, her chanting filling the crystal chamber with resonant harmonics. As the ceremony progressed, Marcus felt the pressure building, not just from Seylith, but from the room itself. The crystal walls amplified her unstable energy, creating a feedback loop that grew stronger with each passing moment. Seylith's hands were trembling. She whispered, her voice strained. "It's too much. The crystals, the attention, I can feel all of them watching, waiting for me to..." "Look at me," Marcus said softly. "Just me." Her black eyes met his, and he saw panic there, raw and overwhelming. "I'm going to hurt you," she said. "I can feel it building. You need to run." "I'm not running. You'll die. Then I'll die standing next to you." He took both her hands in his, ignoring the gasps from the crowd as visible energy began to arc between them. "You're not alone in this, Seylith. You haven't been alone since I walked into your chambers yesterday." "You don't understand," she said, tears cutting silver tracks down her face. "Destroyed things. I am the monster they say I am." "You're not a monster. You're someone who's been carrying an impossible weight without anyone to help." Marcus stepped closer, energy crackling around them, the crystals beginning to vibrate dangerously. "Let me help you carry it." "How? I don't know. We'll figure it out together." The High Priestess had stopped chanting. The nobles were backing toward the exits. Only Ambassador Vethera and the guards remained, and even they looked ready to flee. "Together," Seylith repeated, as though testing the word. The energy around them peaked, a blinding surge that should have reduced Marcus to ash. And then it flowed into him. Not destructively, but gently, like water finding a new channel. Marcus gasped as he felt her power move through him, vast and terrible and beautiful. He couldn't control it, couldn't contain it. But somehow his presence gave it somewhere to go that wasn't outward, wasn't destructive. The crystals stopped vibrating. The arcs of energy faded. The pressure in the room normalized. Seylith stared at him, her expression one of absolute shock. That's impossible. No one can ground my power. No one." "Apparently no one told the human that," Lord Vathis said, his voice hollow with disbelief. Marcus swayed slightly, overwhelmed by the experience, and Seylith caught him. For a moment, they stood there, supporting each other, and Marcus realized that the black lines on her skin had changed. They were no longer jagged and erratic. They flowed in smooth, elegant patterns, like rivers seen from space. "The bond," the High Priestess whispered, approaching cautiously. It's complete, more than complete. I've never seen anything like it." "What does that mean?" Vethera demanded. "It means they are linked, truly linked. His presence stabilizes her power." The priestess looked at Marcus with something approaching reverence. He's her anchor. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Seylith ignored all of it, her attention fixed on Marcus. "You could have died," she said. "So could you. You've been dying slowly for years." He reached up to touch her face, wiping away the silver tracks of her tears. "Now we live together instead." Her hand covered his, pressing it against her cheek. "Why? Why would you risk everything for a stranger? For someone everyone warned you was dangerous?" "Because I saw you," Marcus said simply. "Not your power, not your reputation. You." The political fallout from the bonding ceremony took weeks to settle. The council, having intended to use the marriage to eliminate both the troublesome princess and Earth's diplomatic presence, found themselves outmaneuvered by the simplest of circumstances. Genuine connection. Lord Vathis' faction attempted to have the bond annulled, claiming it was an act of human manipulation. Their motion failed when Seylith, stable for the first time in years, demonstrated precise control over her abilities in a public display that left the council chamber's ancient stones unscratched. "The human is beneficial to the Empire," Ambassador Vethera declared, and though her tone was grudging, the words carried weight. Earth's application for Covenant membership will proceed. Marcus and Seylith watched the vote from a gallery above the council floor, their hands intertwined. In the month since their bonding, she had begun to transform, not just in her abilities, but in herself. The isolation that had defined her existence was fading, replaced by something fragile and new. They still whisper about us, she observed, watching the nobles cast their votes. They think you've enchanted me somehow. Have I? Perhaps. She looked at him, and though her eyes were still entirely black, there was warmth in them now, though not in the way they imagined. Earth's membership passed with a narrow majority. As the results were announced, cheers erupted from the small human delegation in attendance, a handful of diplomats who had traveled months to witness this moment. Your world is part of the Covenant now, Seylith said. You've achieved what you came for. I achieved far more than that. They stood as the session concluded, and Marcus noticed that the nobles who had once looked at him with pity or contempt now watched with something closer to uncertainty. He was no longer the disposable human, the sacrifice meant to fail. He was the consort of the most powerful scion in the Empire, and more importantly, he was the man who had accomplished what no Corinthian could. He had reached her. That evening, they walked together through the palace gardens. The same gardens Seylith had watched from her window for years, but never entered. She had been too afraid of what her uncontrolled power might do to the carefully cultivated beauty. Now, she knelt beside a bed of crystalline flowers and touched one gently. It bloomed at her contact, responding to her stabilized energy with a burst of bioluminescent light. I thought I would never have this, she said quietly. Any of this, a partner. Freedom, peace. Marcus knelt beside her. What changed? You asked me what I expected. She looked at him, and there was wonder in her expression. No one had ever asked that before. They told me what I was, what I would do, what I could not have. You asked what I wanted. And what did you want? This. She gestured at the garden, at the sky, at him. To be seen as something other than a weapon or a threat. To be touched without fear. She reached out and took his hand. To matter to someone not because of what I could do, but because of who I am. You matter to me, Marcus said. You've mattered since the moment you called yourself defective, and I saw how much it cost you to believe it. The council gave you a defective bride, Seylith said, echoing the words from that first day. She could shatter planets with a thought. They gave me you, Marcus replied, and you could heal a galaxy with your heart. She kissed him then, under the alien stars, surrounded by flowers that glowed with the light of her finally peaceful power. It was not the desperate clash of passion that stories told of, but something quieter and deeper, a promise, a beginning, a choice made freely by two people who had both known loneliness and chose each other instead. When they parted, Seylith rested her forehead against his. I am still dangerous, she said. There will be days when the power is difficult, days when the old fears return. I know. You don't regret it? Choosing this? Choosing me? Marcus smiled and pulled her close, feeling the steady pulse of her power flowing through their bond, no longer a threat, but connection. I chose you, he said. And I would choose you again, every time, in every universe, until the stars burn out and beyond. Seylith closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that she was not a curse, but a gift. Not a weapon, but a woman. Not defective, but simply waiting for someone brave enough to see past the warnings to the truth beneath. She had found that someone in the most unlikely of places, a fragile human who had taught an empire that the strongest power in any galaxy was not the ability to shatter planets. It was the courage to love what others feared.